Caleb Morgan started his morning the same way he did every day, long before the sun had fully risen. He stepped out of his wooden ranch house, stretched his arms, and breathed in the cool air. The sky was still soft and gray, and the world felt quiet. His ranch spread across miles of dry land, and though he was a wealthy man, he still worked like any ordinary cowboy. He believed that if a man owned land, he should care for it with his own hands. So even with hired workers, he liked to ride out and check on things himself. By mid-morning, the heat picked up faster than usual. The sun was harsh, the ground cracked, and the air shimmered like glass. Caleb knew that days like this were hard on both cattle and people. He rode his horse, Dusty, across the open land, following the trail that led near the old oak tree that had stood there longer than anyone could remember. He didn't expect to see anyone, because very few people walked through the dry land during such heat unless they had no choice. But when he reached the tree, he noticed someone sitting underneath it still, silent, almost blending into the dusty shade. He slowed Dusty to a stop and looked carefully. It was a woman. She sat with her back to the rough bark, her long dark hair falling forward, her shoulders rising and falling slowly with each breath. She didn't look up, didn't move, as though she was too tired to respond. Caleb felt a small tug of concern. He didn't like disturbing strangers, but he also couldn't ride past someone who looked like they needed help. So he climbed off his horse and stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance. He cleared his throat softly, just enough to let her know someone was there. The woman lifted her head slightly. Her eyes were sharp but tired, like she had been walking for days. Her clothes were dusty from travel. She looked strong in spirit, but worn out by the heat. Caleb didn't know her, but he could tell right away that she wasn't someone who usually asked for help. He tipped his hat gently. "Ma'am, you all right there?" She didn't answer at first. It seemed she was trying to judge whether he meant well. After a few seconds, she gave a small nod, slow, unsure, but enough for him to know she wasn't ignoring him. Caleb reached for his canteen, unscrewed the cap, and held it out toward her without stepping too close. "Here," he said calmly. "Water. You look like you could use some." The woman hesitated again, her eyes moving from the canteen to his face. She searched for signs of false kindness, the sort used by people who expected something in return. But Caleb's face stayed relaxed, steady, patient. He didn't push her. Finally, she reached out and took the canteen, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted it. She drank slowly, as though every sip mattered. Caleb could see how thirsty she was, but she didn't gulp or rush. She drank with quiet discipline, like someone used to controlling her needs. When she finished, she wiped her mouth politely and handed the canteen back with both hands, a sign of respect. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice was light, but it carried strength. Caleb nodded. "You're welcome, ma'am." He didn't ask her name right away. He sensed that she wasn't ready to share much. Instead, he asked a simple question. "You traveling far?" She looked down at her hands. "A long way," she murmured, not giving details. Caleb understood. Some people had stories they weren't ready to tell. He saw that her feet were dusty and her shoes worn. Her shoulders sagged like she hadn't rested properly in days. Caleb didn't want to pry, but he also didn't want to leave her sitting under the burning sun with nothing more than a half moment of kindness. So he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small cloth bundle, some dried meat, bread, and a little fruit. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give someone strength. "You should eat something," he said, placing the bundle on a clean patch of ground near her so she wouldn't feel pressured to take it from his hands. She looked at the food, then at him again. "Why?" she asked quietly. He paused, surprised by the question. "Because you look like you need it," he said simply. "No other reason." She seemed to weigh those words. After a moment, she gave a slow nod and picked up the food. She didn't thank him again, but he could see in her eyes that she appreciated it. Caleb stepped back, giving her space to eat. He didn't want her to think he was waiting for something. He returned to Dusty and patted the horse's neck, letting the moment stay calm and quiet. The only sounds were the rustle of dry grass and the low sighs of the wind. After she finished eating, she finally spoke again. "My name is Ayana." Her voice was still soft, but she seemed more open. Caleb tipped his hat. "Caleb Morgan. Nice to meet you, ma'am." There was a brief silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like one of those rare moments when two strangers shared an understanding, without needing to talk much. Ayana looked toward the open land, her gaze distant. "People do not usually stop for me," she said gently. "Not unless they want something." Caleb shook his head lightly. "Kindness doesn't cost a man anything," he replied. "And nobody should be walking this land alone, in this kind of heat." She gave him a small, almost surprised smile. It wasn't wide, but it was genuine. It softened her tired face, making Caleb realize she was younger than he had first thought, though her eyes carried old pain. After a few more moments, Ayana shifted slightly and stood, steadying herself with a hand on the tree. Caleb noticed how carefully she moved, as if her body was sore from long travel. He wanted to offer her a ride, but he held his tongue. He didn't want her to feel uncomfortable. "You helped me," she said, tying the empty food cloth neatly. "I will return your kindness one day." Caleb shook his head. "No need. Just make sure you're safe." She gave another soft nod, then took a step back, ready to continue her journey. Caleb watched her go for a moment. She walked with a quiet strength, but he could tell she was still exhausted. A small part of him worried about her traveling alone, but he also respected her independence. She seemed like someone who valued her freedom deeply. Before she disappeared into the open land, she turned and looked back at him. Their eyes met for a brief second. It wasn't a long stare, but it carried meaning, gratitude, trust, maybe even curiosity. Then she turned again and walked away, her figure growing smaller until she blended with the dusty horizon. Caleb stood there for a long moment, feeling the strange pull of the encounter. He didn't understand why this simple meeting felt different from all the other times he had helped travelers. Something about her calm strength, her quiet voice, her tired eyes stayed with him. He climbed back onto Dusty. But as he rode toward his ranch, he kept glancing back at the horizon, as if expecting to see her again. The memory of her sitting under the old oak tree stayed in his mind, and he didn't try to push it away. He let it stay. He felt it would matter later, even if he didn't yet know how. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Caleb didn't realize that the simple act of offering water that day was only the beginning of a connection that would slowly shape both their lives. Ayana walked slowly across the dry land, her steps steady but heavy. The sun lowered in the sky, turning the ground golden and soft. She held the empty canteen Caleb had given her, running her fingers along its smooth surface. She wasn't used to receiving kindness from strangers. In her life, people often passed her by, or they looked at her with caution, or they tried to take advantage of her vulnerability. But this morning had been different. Caleb had offered help without asking anything in return. He didn't stare too long, didn't push her for answers, didn't show false politeness. His kindness was quiet and simple, and that made it stay in her heart more strongly than anything else. She reached the small place she had chosen to rest near the edge of the land, an area where tall grass and a few scattered stones offered a bit of comfort. She set down her small bundle of belongings, all she had left after many difficult months. She rested there for a while, watching the sky shift colors. Her mind kept drifting back to the moment at the oak tree. The way Caleb had stood a respectful distance away, the way he had placed food on the ground instead of handing it directly to her, the way he spoke gently without trying to control the moment. She didn't understand why it affected her so much, but she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Warmth, safety, and a sense that maybe not everyone in the world wanted to take something from her. She looked at the empty canteen again, then made a small decision. She would return it. Not because he asked, but because gratitude lived strongly in her spirit. Returning the canteen felt like the right thing to do. She waited until the heat softened and the shadows grew long. Then she picked up her things and began to walk toward the direction of the ranch she had heard about from others in passing conversations. Caleb Morgan was known among the townspeople. He was wealthy, but he didn't walk around showing it off. He worked with his hands, ate simple meals, and treated people fairly. Some said he had lost family long ago and carried that sadness quietly. Others said he simply believed a man should be humble, no matter how much land he owned. Whatever the reason, people respected him. As Ayanna drew closer to the ranch, she felt a nervous flutter inside. She didn't often step into the lands of others. She had always kept to herself, choosing simple paths and quiet spaces. But tonight felt different. She didn't want to return the canteen by leaving it at his gate. She wanted to hand it to him, to speak a little more, to show she didn't take his kindness lightly. The wooden fence surrounding his property appeared in the distance. Beyond it, she could hear the soft sounds of horses moving, the gentle thump of hooves against dirt, and the rustle of hay. She saw a warm light glowing from the small stable area and figured he might be working there. She paused at the edge of the fence, taking a breath before she stepped closer. Caleb was inside the stable, brushing Dusty's mane. He hummed quietly to himself, something he often did when he felt at peace. Dusty leaned into the brush, enjoying the care. Caleb didn't notice Ayanna at first, until Dusty lifted his head and flicked his ears toward the door. Caleb followed the horse's gaze and saw her standing quietly near the fence. He blinked in surprise but smiled gently. "Evelyn, ma'am," he said in a calm, friendly tone. "Didn't expect to see you again." Ayanna stepped closer, holding out the canteen with both hands. Caleb wiped his hands on a cloth before taking it. "Thank you," he said. "I'm glad you came back. Wasn't sure if that water helped enough." "It did," she replied. "More than you know." Caleb nodded, feeling a small tug in his chest at her sincerity. He didn't want her to feel rushed or uncomfortable, so he stepped aside from the stable doorway and gestured lightly. "You're welcome to sit by the fence if you like. I'm just finishing up with Dusty." She hesitated only for a moment before she moved closer and rested her hands on the top rail of the fence. She watched Caleb's movements as he brushed the horse, steady, patient, and gentle. There was something calming about the way he worked. Dusty seemed to adore him, nudging his shoulder every now and then, as if asking for more attention. Ayanna studied the scene quietly. She had seen many men in her life, some loud, some boastful, some heavy with anger or bitterness. But Caleb was different. Everything about him seemed balanced and steady, like a man who had been through enough hardship to understand the value of peace. Caleb glanced at her occasionally, making sure she felt comfortable. "You travel alone often?" he asked, keeping his voice soft so it didn't feel like an interrogation. "For a long time now," she answered. "I had a family once, but life changed." He understood that tone. It was the tone of someone who had lost things that could not be replaced. He didn't ask further. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Ayanna nodded, appreciating that he didn't push. "People are kind sometimes," she added, "but usually it does not feel safe." Caleb leaned the brush against the stable wall. "I get that," he replied. "Some folks offer help with the wrong intentions." He paused, then added, "But I won't ever trouble you that way." Her eyes softened. "I know," she said simply. There was something comforting about how they spoke slow, honest, without pressure. The evening breeze carried the scent of hay and earth, and the sky continued turning deeper shades of orange and purple. Ayanna felt surprisingly peaceful standing there. After finishing with Dusty, Caleb walked over to the rail near her. You haven't had a proper rest today, have you? He asked, gently. I rested for a while near the tall grass, she said. But my body still feels tired. You're welcome to sit a bit longer if you need, he said. No rush here. Ayanna looked around the ranch. It felt quiet, safe, untouched by the loud troubles of the world. She felt something she couldn't quite explain, maybe a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years, even if it was only for a moment. She folded her hands thoughtfully. You helped me earlier, she said softly. And you spoke kindly. I do not forget such things. Her eyes lowered, then lifted again with a shy steadiness. If you wish, you may visit my camp tonight. I would like to return the kindness. I can prepare warm food. Caleb was caught off guard. Not by the invitation itself, but by the gentle sincerity behind it. He didn't want her to think he interpreted it wrongly or expected anything more than gratitude. So he answered carefully. That's very kind of you, he said with respect in his tone, but only if you truly want me to come. I do, she replied without hesitation. It is my way. Kindness must be honored. Caleb nodded slowly. All right then. I'd be honored to join you. Ayanna felt her heart steady in her chest. She liked how he responded, calm, polite, not assuming anything. She told him the direction of her small camp, not far from the tall grass where she first rested. He memorized the path easily. He had spent years riding across every corner of this land. She stayed for a few more minutes, watching as Caleb fed Dusty and checked the horses in the nearby stalls. Every movement he made seemed thoughtful and natural. He wasn't pretending to be humble, he simply lived that way. Caleb walked her back to the fence and opened a small gate for her. If you need anything before I head over, just call. I'll be nearby. Ayanna offered him a gentle, grateful smile. I will be fine, she said. I will see you later. Caleb watched her walk away, her steps quiet and graceful. He felt something stirring inside him, something he couldn't quite describe. It wasn't romantic excitement or admiration. It was something deeper, a respect for her strength, a desire to protect her peace, and a curiosity about her past without wanting to pry. As she faded into the distance, Caleb leaned against the fence for a moment. The world felt calmer than usual. He remembered the way she had looked earlier under the oak tree. Tired, thirsty, alone, and now she walked with more steadiness. Something about that made him feel warm inside. Dusty nudged his arm gently, as if reminding him that work still needed finishing. Caleb chuckled softly and returned to the stable, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the quiet woman who had thanked him with more than words. By the time the sky grew darker and the first stars appeared, Caleb felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Tonight, he would visit her camp, not as a man expecting anything, but as someone who respected her gratitude and wished to honor her sincerity. He didn't know what the night would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. The simple act of offering water had set something gentle and unexpected into motion, something that was slowly guiding both their lives toward a new direction neither had imagined before. Caleb left the stable only when the last bit of daylight faded from the sky. The ranch had grown quiet, the workers gone home, and the horses resting in their stalls. A calm stillness covered the land, the kind that made even the distant hills look peaceful. The faint glow of lanterns lit the porch of his house. But Caleb didn't go inside. Instead, he walked toward Dusty, who was already saddled and waiting, as if the horse knew his rider's thoughts without being told. Caleb gently rubbed Dusty's neck and whispered, "Just a short ride, boy." He didn't want to hurry. He didn't want Ayanna to think he was expecting something or rushing for any reason. He simply wanted to show up with respect for her invitation. He mounted the horse and directed him toward the open land. The night air was much cooler than the day's heat, and a soft breeze brushed past Caleb's shoulders. Stars stretched across the sky, countless and bright, and for a moment he slowed Dusty, just to take in the quiet beauty around him. He wondered if Ayana was already preparing her small campfire, wondering whether he would actually come. He didn't understand why her invitation meant so much to him. Maybe it was because she didn't invite people easily. Maybe it was because she spoke with honesty, something rare in the world. Or maybe it was simply because the moment they met under that oak tree had stirred something gentle inside him, something he didn't know was still there. As he rode closer to the tall grass area she had described, Caleb saw a faint orange glow in the distance. Ayana had lit a small fire. Just enough to warm the night, but not enough to draw attention. She sat beside it, preparing food with careful movements. Her posture was calm, steady, the flames reflecting softly in her dark eyes. When she saw Caleb approaching, she didn't stand suddenly or react nervously. She simply lifted her gaze and gave a small nod, welcoming him in her quiet way. Caleb dismounted quietly and led Dusty a few steps away so the horse could graze. He approached the fire slowly, not wanting to intrude. Ayana gestured toward a smooth, flat stone across from her, a place she had clearly prepared for him. He sat down, feeling the gentle warmth of the fire touch his face. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. Her voice held a calm sincerity, as if she had truly hoped he would show up. "I'm glad you invited me," Caleb replied. "It's been a while since I've shared a meal with someone this way." Ayana stirred the food in a small iron pot, the aroma rising gently into the cool air. It smelled simple but good herbs, vegetables, and something hearty she had gathered along her travels. She moved with practiced ease, as if cooking was one of the few things she still held on to from her past life. Caleb watched her for a moment, then looked into the fire. "I hope I'm not interrupting your peace," he said quietly. "You are not," she replied. "The world feels less lonely tonight." That sentence stayed with him. He didn't know exactly what she had endured, but he could sense years of quiet struggle behind her gentle voice. He didn't push for details. Instead, he let the silence settle between them again. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that made the fire crackle louder and the night feel softer around them. When the food was ready, Ayana served it to him first, a sign of respect in her culture. Caleb accepted it with gratitude, taking care not to waste a single bite. The flavors were simple, honest, and comforting. Ayana ate after him, and for several minutes, they didn't speak, letting the fire and the night carry the weight of the moment. After a while, Caleb placed his bowl aside and looked at her gently. "You cook well," he said. "Reminds me of meals I used to have with family long ago." She glanced at him with a faint hint of curiosity. "You had a big family?" "Not big," he replied. "Just close." He paused for a moment, then added, "Lost them too early." Ayana lowered her gaze but didn't speak. She respected silence when someone revealed something personal. Caleb appreciated that. Many people asked questions he didn't want to answer, but she simply listened with her eyes and stayed quiet. After a moment, Ayana looked up again. "People often hide their sadness," she said softly, "but it shows in the way they move, the way they speak. I saw that in you today." Caleb wasn't sure how to respond at first. She had noticed more than he expected. He gave a small, honest smile. "Maybe that's why your company feels easy," he said gently. "You understand things without needing to be told." Ayana held his gaze for a moment, then looked toward the fire. Her voice lowered slightly as she said, "I left my village because the memories were too heavy. I tried to stay, but each day reminded me of things I lost. So, I chose the road." Caleb nodded slowly. "Walking alone like that must be hard." "It is," she admitted. "But sometimes, the road gives space for the heart to breathe." Her words carried a quiet wisdom that touched Caleb. He noticed that she wasn't bitter or angry. She carried her pain with dignity. He admired that deeply. The wind rustled through the tall grass around them, creating a soft whisper. The night grew cooler, but the fire kept them warm. Caleb glanced at Ayanna again, noticing the calm expression on her face. For someone who had traveled alone for so long, she looked strangely at peace with him sitting there. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said, after a long pause. Ayanna nodded gently. "When you invited me, were you sure you wanted someone like me near your camp? Most folks out here are cautious." "I am cautious," she replied, "but I trust what I feel. Today, at the tree, you spoke with respect. You did not try to force anything. You walked away without expecting anything. That tells me more about a man than any words." Caleb felt something warm rise in his chest. He didn't know if he deserved such trust, but he wanted to. "I'm glad you saw that in me," he said quietly. For a moment, their eyes met again, a soft, steady connection that didn't need to be named. It wasn't romance, but something deeper: understanding, acknowledgement, and gratitude for a moment of shared peace. Ayanna eventually shifted her seat and added a few dry sticks to the fire. The flames grew brighter for a moment, lighting the small space between them. The light made her features stand out, her calm eyes, her thoughtful expression, her quiet strength. She looked at him again and said, "When I ate alone, the food felt heavy. Tonight, it feels warm." It was her way of saying his presence mattered. Caleb felt the words settle in his heart. He hadn't expected that offering water would lead to a moment like this. He hadn't expected anything at all. But now, sitting here with her, he realized that sometimes the smallest act of kindness created pathways people didn't know existed. They talked a little more, not deeply, not quickly, but with gentle curiosity. Caleb asked her about the herbs she used in cooking. She asked about his horses and how he raised them. They kept the conversation light, both sensing that the night didn't need heavy stories. After some time, the fire softened into glowing embers. Dusty lifted his head from grazing and let out a quiet snort, reminding Caleb that it was getting late. Ayanna watched him rise to his feet, a small, thoughtful expression crossing her face. "You are leaving now?" she asked softly. "I should," Caleb said. "You need your rest. And I don't want to overstay." She stood slowly as well, folding her hands in front of her. For a brief moment, she seemed unsure, as if searching for the right words. Then, she looked at him with quiet confidence. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "If you want me to." She gave him a small, warm nod. "I would like that." Caleb felt something settle firmly inside him, a sense that this meeting was not a passing event, but the beginning of a gentle connection neither of them had expected. He stepped back, tipped his hat respectfully, and walked toward Dusty. As he rode away, he glanced back once. Ayanna was still standing there, her figure lit softly by the fading embers of the fire. She didn't wave or call out. She simply watched him leave with the same quiet dignity she carried in every movement. And in that silent moment, Caleb understood that the night had changed something important. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in a slow, steady way that felt real. Offering water had opened a door neither of them knew they needed, and now, with each step forward, their paths were beginning to gently intertwine. The next morning, Caleb woke early, even before the first rays of sunlight touched the wide-open land. He had slept lightly, his mind wandering back to the quiet campfire and the soft eyes of Ayanna. He had not known that a simple act, giving water to someone in need, could create a chain of moments that would linger in his thoughts so strongly. There was something about her presence that stayed with him. Something gentle, yet firm. A reminder that even the smallest kindness could echo longer than he had imagined. He stepped outside his wooden ranch house and stretched his arms, taking in the cool morning air. The horizon was painted in shades of soft pink and orange. Caleb felt a calm determination. Today, he would visit Ayanna again not because he was compelled, but because he wanted to. He wanted to honor the trust she had placed in him, and he wanted to continue the simple peace they had found together. After a quick breakfast, he saddled Dusty and checked the fence line to ensure the cattle were safe. He rode slowly, enjoying the calm of the morning. The land was quiet, and the air smelled faintly of dry grass and earth. He followed the familiar trail toward the tall grass where Ayana's camp was set. As he approached, he could see smoke rising gently from a small fire. The sight made him smile. She had been preparing, just as she had promised. Ayana noticed him before he arrived completely. She had stepped out slightly from the shade of the trees, her eyes bright but calm. She held a small bundle, perhaps breakfast or a few fresh herbs she had gathered. Her posture was relaxed, but her heart raced a little with anticipation. She had not expected that Caleb would come early, yet a part of her had hoped he would. Seeing him now confirmed a quiet truth. She had begun to accept his presence, brought her comfort. Caleb dismounted quietly and patted Dusty's neck. "Good morning," he said softly, careful not to startle her. "Good morning," she replied, her voice light and steady. She motioned toward the fire. "Sit with me. I prepared something simple." He nodded and sat down on the flat stone she had set aside yesterday. The warmth from the small fire felt comforting against the slight chill of the morning air. She handed him a small wooden bowl filled with porridge mixed with fresh berries and herbs. Caleb accepted it with gratitude and a small smile. "It smells wonderful," he said sincerely. Ayana watched him eat, noting the calm way he handled each bite. There was no rush, no pretension, only presence. It was rare to see someone so simple, yet so composed. "I thought it would give you strength," she said. "You rode far yesterday." He looked up at her, appreciation clear in his eyes. "It will," he said. They ate in a companionable silence for a few moments, the fire crackling softly between them. Caleb noticed that she seemed more relaxed than the day before. Her movements were smooth and assured, the shadows of yesterday's weariness no longer so evident. He realized that she had already begun to find peace here, in this simple sharing of time and respect. After breakfast, Caleb helped her with a small task she had been planning: securing her modest camp and arranging supplies. It was not heavy work, but it allowed them to move together, naturally, exchanging light conversation and stories of daily life. She told him of the small things she had learned to live by on the road, the quiet rules she followed to keep herself safe and strong. He listened intently, offering gentle comments, asking respectful questions, and never pushing for information she did not volunteer. The morning passed quickly. The sun rose higher, warming the land, yet the presence of the fire and the shade from the trees made the space comfortable. Caleb noticed that each story she shared was accompanied by a soft smile or a thoughtful pause. She had endured hardship, yes, but she did not carry bitterness in her words. Her voice had a gentle steadiness that reassured him, made him feel that despite the harshness of the world, kindness could still be honored and shared. When they paused for a rest, Caleb looked at her and spoke quietly. "You trust me," he said simply. Ayana met his gaze steadily. "I do," she said. "Not easily, but I trust what feels true. And yesterday, at the fire, you showed me truth." Caleb nodded, feeling a warmth inside. Trust was a rare thing for him as well. He had spent years dealing with business, people who were not always honest, and the loneliness of managing land with only his thoughts for company. But here, with her, trust was natural, not forced. He realized that their connection had grown without either of them fully noticing, simply because it had been built on respect and gentle care. The day continued with quiet tasks. Caleb showed her a few things about the land near her camp, how to check the soil for moisture, how to notice the tracks of animals in the dust. Simple but practical knowledge from his years of experience. Ayana listened carefully, absorbing every detail. She appreciated not just the knowledge, but the way he shared it patiently, without condescension, without any hint of superiority. It made her feel valued, seen as a person rather than a passerby. By mid-afternoon, the sun had climbed high, and the land felt hot again. They took a break under a small clump of trees, sitting close but not intruding on each other's space. Ayanna pulled out a small water skin and offered it to him. Caleb accepted, appreciating the gesture. "Thank you," he said. "You've thought of everything." She smiled faintly. "It is the least I can do," she said. "You have been so kind, yet you ask nothing in return." Caleb shook his head gently. "Kindness asks nothing," he said. "It is a gift we give freely. Nothing more." For a moment, they let the quiet settle again. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying soft scents of earth and grass. Caleb watched her carefully, noticing the quiet confidence in her posture, the way her eyes reflected both strength and gentleness. He realized that she had endured much, but had retained a core of dignity and self-respect that made her remarkable. As the day wore on, they shared more stories, not deep personal histories, but light observations, reflections on the land, animals, and moments of travel. Caleb told her about Dusty, how he had raised him from a colt, and how every horse carried its own spirit that must be respected. Ayanna spoke of the roads she had traveled, the quiet places she had discovered, and the small joys she had found in nature despite her hardships. Each story built a quiet bridge between them, connecting them not through words alone, but through shared understanding. Eventually, Caleb stood and stretched. "I should head back," he said. "But I will return tonight if you wish." Ayanna nodded. "Yes," she said, "I would like that. You have honored my invitation. I wish to share more time with you." The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Caleb helped her tidy the camp, ensuring everything was neat before he left. The simple act of caring for her space, even in small ways, strengthened their quiet bond. It was not about possession or expectation, but about respect, honoring each other's space, time, and presence. When he finally mounted Dusty, he looked back once more. Ayanna stood by the fire, her figure calm and composed, yet her eyes betrayed a quiet joy that matched his own feelings. He tipped his hat and smiled gently. "I will see you tonight," he said. "I will be here," she replied softly. As he rode back to his ranch, the land darkened under the coming night. Caleb felt a sense of anticipation, mixed with calm. He did not know what the future held, but he understood that something important had begun. Two people, both cautious in their own ways, had found a connection built on kindness, respect, and trust. That connection would guide the next steps of their lives, slowly, gently, and honestly. By the time he returned to his ranch, the stars were bright in the clear sky. He fed Dusty, checked the fences once more, and then prepared for the evening. The fire at Ayanna's camp, he knew, would be waiting for him, and so would her presence. That night would be another step in the quiet journey they had begun. A journey built not on haste or expectation, but on mutual understanding and the simple, powerful act of shared human kindness. And so, as the first stars appeared and the wind whispered softly through the tall grass, Caleb felt a quiet certainty. What had started with offering water, a gesture so small, had blossomed into something far greater. It was a friendship, a trust, and perhaps the beginning of a bond neither of them had dared imagine. Tonight, their paths would cross again, and the quiet strength they had discovered in each other would grow even more. Step by gentle step,